I'm going to start recording.
Recording in progress.
Oh, there we go. Amanda, you're under Ralph, aren't you? That's right. All right, we'll get you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for your patience. We're just going to give a second for folks' audio to get connected. Right. So I think that we will get started. This is the February, I almost said January, but this is the February 24th meeting of the Portland Clean Energy Fund Grants Committee. And I'm going to just start by going over some virtual participation guidelines, and then we'll have we'll move into have an opening inspiration and do some introductions, and then move on to public comment from there, and then into the agenda. So just so folks know, this meeting is being recorded. It's also being live streamed on YouTube. These committee meetings are open to the public. The public the public comment period will start the slide says around 6:05, but it's going to be a few minutes after that, but we won't skip it. The public is asked to observe and listen during the meetings, except during the public comment period. There are other opportunities for public engagement in other forums. If folks who are logged on, who are members of the public, you can use the chat box to kind of introduce yourself, include your name, your pronouns. If you have an organizational affiliation you're interested in sharing, you can put that into the chat box, and then we'll read those off. Also, if you're interested in providing public comment, please indicate your interest there by sending a chat so that we can kind of make a list and queue you up. And when we call on you, we ask you to unmute yourself, and if you want to turn your video on, but obviously not required. There is also closed captioning available during this meeting, and you can find that by going to the menu bar in the Zoom menu bar, and where there are the three dots, the drop-down menu, you can go and view the transcript that is the real-time captioning that's happening. So just for the folks who, I saw a handful of folks who were kind of being let in from the waiting room as I was talking. So I'll just repeat that if folks could put their introductory selves into the chat box so that we can read off your name and get a sense of everyone who's here, and also indicate any interest you have in providing public comment by putting that in the chat box as well. So before we start introductions, I am going to hand it over to one of our colleagues, Angela Previdelli, who has generously offered to provide the opening inspiration tonight.
Great. Can you all hear me okay? Can I get a nod? Okay, great. Love that this is the first time that we're YouTubing and that there's such great attendance for my first inspiration. No pressure. So Angela Previdelli, I'm the grants management analyst on the PCEF team. Since this is the only committee meeting that will be taking place during Black History Month, I chose to talk about Octavia Butler. Today also happens to mark 15 years to the day since she passed. So I have just like a little bit that's pulled together, by no means exhaustive, about Octavia Butler, but just some reflections and some of her writing. So first, who is Octavia Butler to me? This past summer, I fell in love with her, and I was listening to Parable of the Sower while hiking on the north side of Mount Hood, and was listening to her talk about a world that was on fire. And it was the day that the fires and the smoke rolled into town. And it was a really surreal and really vivid. I felt like I was in her writing in a very real way. And she's come to mean a lot to me, and I've sort of done a deep dive and fallen in love with her writing from there. So I want to read a little bit about what others have said about what Octavia Butler means to them. So this is Lester Spence writing, this was an NPR obituary about Octavia Butler from 2006. When Butler first proposed the novel Kindred in the 70s, the number of rejection letters she received were legions. They said what she proposed wasn't science fiction. Time travel didn't occur in the Deep South, and science fiction definitely didn't have Black heroines. Before Butler stepped up to the plate, no one ever contemplated writing a science fiction time traveling story about the Deep South and slavery. No one had ever thought about writing a story about how a young, poor Black girl could create a religion that would change the face of the world. Indeed, her female characters are some of the richest Black characters ever to see print. What Butler understood long before most of the writers in the field did was that Black culture throughout the diaspora could and should be used to tell universal stories of pain, loss, of growth, of majesty. And then I have a quote that I want to read from Adrienne Marie Brown. Here we go. What happened over and over again in her stories, and you see this over and over again, is that people doubted their capacity not only to lead, but to be of use in any way. And then her characters, rather than pushing, rather than fighting, they would turn inward. They would gather themselves and get aligned with what they thought. So in Parables, the 2 books that she wrote, it's the Earthseed belief system. They would get aligned and say, I have a greater destiny than your oppression, and my destiny will take me beyond anything that your oppression can hold me from. And then over and over again, we watch those characters follow that path of destiny and take themselves and anyone who wants to come with them beyond, which I also think is important because she wrote about Black women and about Black feminism, about Black futures, but she wrote in a way that appealed to all human beings. And so to close out, she wrote something very prescient, Octavia Butler did, that relates to climate change and our sort of charge and why I'm so thankful to be part of this team in this effort. Octavia said, I want to talk about what's going to happen if we keep doing what we've been doing, if we keep recklessly endangering the environment, if we keep paying no attention to economic realities, if we keep paying no attention to educational needs, if we keep doing a lot of the things that are hurting us now. And that's what I wound up writing about, and everything else just kind of fell into place. I hope they're not prophecy because I don't want to live in that world.
Thank you, Angela. All right, we're going to move on to introductions, and I'm going to start with committee members and then move to staff. We're going to, I think, do the introductions of the members of the public a little bit differently just because we do have a lot of folks here. So rather than usually Sam is asked to read everybody's name aloud, and for this meeting, I'm just going to ask folks to scroll through the chat box. I think we have 74 participants total, so we want to be able to get to the agenda, but we can kind of see who is here in the chat box. So I'm going to start by just calling on committee members, and I'd like to start with Faith.
Somehow I knew you were going to start with me because I wasn't scrolled to the right screen. Hi, everyone. Good evening. It's so nice to be back with you all. I'm a committee member. My name is Faith Graham, and I'm a huge Octavia Butler fan.
I'm down to stay on the phone. I just got to take them.
Yep. Robin.
I'm also having mute problems. Good evening, Robin Wang, committee member, he, him.
Maria.
Hi, everyone. Maria Sippin, she, they pronouns, committee member.
Jeffrey.
Hi, everyone. Good to be back. Jeffrey Moreland, he, him, committee member.
Michael.
Good to be here also. Michael Eden Hill, he, him, committee member.
All right, Ranfis.
Hi, everyone. Ranfis, Genovia Toro, he, him pronouns. It's good to see everyone.
Thanks, Ranfis. Shanice.
Hello, everyone. Shanice Clark, committee member, she and her pronouns.
Amanda.
Hi, everyone. Amanda Squempin-Yazzie, she, her, committee member.
And I didn't see if Megan Horst is our last committee member, and who told us she was going to be a few minutes late, and I don't see that she has joined us. She said she was going to be 10 or 15 minutes late, so we will have her introduce herself when she gets here. I'm going to start with myself and end with Sam. So I'm Katie Lister. I'm PCEF staff, and I use she, her pronouns. And I'm going to, I think, maybe ask all of the staff who are here. Not everybody is participating, but it's just a really important meeting, so I think everybody is listening in. Wendy.
Wendy Kelfkin, she, her pronouns, PCEF staff.
June.
June, she, her pronouns, PCEF staff.
Lockie.
Hi, everyone. Lockie Au, PCEF staff, she and they pronouns.
Janet.
Good evening, Janet Hammer, PCEF staff, she, her pronouns.
Oh, and I apologize, Lockie, because Sam should be introducing you since this is your first committee meeting. Since it's been so long, you're not so new to us. So maybe I will just go to Sam so that you can introduce our new staff.
I was going to do so next in a little bit, but this is perfect. I want to acknowledge that we've grown quite a bit. So we've got Lockie Au with us here tonight as our communications manager. Next up is Jay. Let you introduce yourself, and I'll go. So we've got Jay Richmond. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Jay Richmond. I'm the Workforce and Contractor Development Project Manager, and I'm glad to be part of the team.
Thank you, Jay. And I don't see David with us, and I'm sure I'm missing others. So let's pick up from there and keep. Oh, there we go. And I'll also introduce David Granfield, and I should have done this for you, Jay, who's coming on as our Green Infrastructure and Regenerative Ag Project Manager. So David, please introduce yourself.
That was it. You had it all. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you.
And maybe before we move on, if I could ask folks who are members of the public if they wouldn't mind turning their cameras off, only because if your cameras are off, then all of our cubes get arranged together, and it makes it a little bit easier to for committee members to see each other and for staff to be able to see committee members. And I do see now that Megan joined us. Megan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. Apologies for being a few minutes late coming from teaching. I'm Megan Horst, and I'm a committee member. I use she, her pronouns.
Thanks, Megan. Okay, well, I think that we will move on to the public comment period, and we do have looks like 6 people signed up for public comment. So we ask that folks keep it to a few minutes, but are excited to, hear what you have to say. The first person who signed up was Danielle Milan. Could you unmute yourself and turn your camera on if you want to?
Hello, I'm Danielle Milan, and I'm with the Teatro Milagro Miracle Theater, and just wanted to introduce myself because oftentimes people don't think of theater companies as being something that could be a part of city infrastructure, but our building sits on the corner of Southeast 6th and Stark, which is hopefully someday 6th Street's going to be a closed lane. We have participated in the Sunday Parkways, and we're really enthusiastic about the idea that maybe Inner Southeast could have a closed corridor that would encourage bicycle transportation and more community interaction. And so that's my comment. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Danielle. So next we have Quincy Brown. And then after that, just as a heads up, is going to be Marcelino Alvarez. Quincy, are you there?
Yeah, hello all. I'm Quincy. I'm representing We All Rise. We are a grassroots consulting firm supporting children, supporting underserved young people and getting them access to resources and understanding planning and development. And I just wanted to say that we applied for the PCEF grant, and we think it's really important that we train and build the next young clean energy professionals and also get them access to resources. And so I think like we often forget that urban planning and community engagement are necessary for getting to clean energy and a sustainable environment. So we want to make sure that we have resources for young people of color, particularly those who are originally from Portland that are lacking in resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Quincy. Looks like Marcelino is next, and then Hannah Scoot after that.
Thank you, everyone. Marcelino Alvarez. I'm Chief Product Officer at Fresh Consulting, which previously was Uncork Studios. We're actually down the street from Teatro Milagro in the Central East Side. So we're neighbors by a couple of blocks. I'm here in my personal capacity, but also as a business leader who's had to recruit folks over the years and has seen sort of the challenges with recruiting people into a city and people asking like, hey, where are the structural and infrastructural things that I'm used to and accustomed to in other cities, or where, why is housing so expensive? And I think one of the things that I believe could help is creating alternative sources of public transportation that could enable people to live in a broader swath of neighborhoods, but still have a reasonable commute time that uses various modalities, bike, walking, and whatnot. So I'm testifying in favor of the effort that Frog Ferry is pursuing. I believe as a lifelong boater and person who's enjoyed the waterways, I believe that our waterways are underutilized. And I think that a ferry system could certainly provide accessibility of affordable transportation to expand the reach of potential colleagues, clients, collaborators over the years, and would certainly create sort of the infrastructure that would allow us to use our waterways beyond just the public transport. So I'm here to support Frog Ferry's efforts, and I hope that you do too. Thank you.
Thank you. So next we have Hannah, and then after Hannah is going to be our last person who signed up for public comment is Susan Blattle. Hannah?
Hi, everybody. My name is Hannah Skutt. I am a youth climate justice organizer with the Sunrise Movement. I've worked with Sunrise Movement for the past 2 years. And tonight I would love to give public comment on behalf of Frog Ferry and just speak to the work that the Sunrise Movement, PDX, has been doing with Frog Ferry as part of their community benefit plan. We were really excited to work with Frog Ferry as they are an initiative that is started by private citizens who are interested in supporting public infrastructure and advancing social justice. They're really aligned with our Sunrise Movement principles, and we are working together towards a just transition. They have applied for a grant for funding their pilot project, which emphasizes the Cathedral Park and St. John's neighborhoods, which are among, as we know, some of the most diverse neighborhoods in Portland, with 25% of the population living at or below the poverty line. There is an issue with lack of transit options and access to downtown core in these areas, and the current commute time for 8 miles is more than an hour. And river commute would reduce that commute time to 26 minutes. So we'll save passengers lots of time. And we also, the part that I'm really passionate about is the air quality improvements, because we've seen as traffic has increased in the city, air quality has definitely diminished, and we'll continue along that path. And it is really inspiring to see an initiative that is using R99 diesel and will promise to reduce congestion in our major commuting centers. Thank you all for your time. That's it.
Thank you, Hannah. All right, so we have Susan, you're next, and we did have one additional person who just asked if they could provide public comment, and that is Peter. Whose last name is not listed.
Hi,
Susan?
everyone. My name is Susan Bladham, and I'm the founder of Friends of Frog Ferry. And we really appreciate the opportunity and the leadership of the PCEF and your committee. And we just ask you all to kind of imagine a better Portland, our better future for all of us. And a Portland that really provides accessibility to everyone. We have asked in our grant request for help to fund a pilot project. And as Hannah just mentioned, between the Cathedral Park and St. John's neighborhoods down to the South Waterfront, this would be a really transformative mode of transit and would really kind of do our proof of concept to show that ferry service is possible for all of us. We are one of only 4 major river cities in the nation not to have water-based transit. And so we know we're competing with other really worthy projects and look forward to learning more about them. But we ask you to consider the opportunity to activate our river systems with a public ferry service to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and provide a new transit option for residents in Cathedral Park and St. John's. Ours is very much a grassroots effort with a focus on climate and social equity. And we really believe that a healthy transportation system is really core to creating a vibrant and healthy community. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Susan. And then the last person on the list is Peter. Peter?
Hi, should I put my put the camera on or just leave it off and go with the mute? Excuse me, with just the...
Up to you, whatever you like.
Okay, well, sure. So my name's Peter Wilcox, and I'm a Coast Guard licensed Marine captain. I've been a climate activist for 50 years, and I lead a regional marine decarbonization nonprofit. I'm also a very active volunteer in the nonprofit Frog Ferry system, working on net zero propulsion, hull efficiency, and emission reductions. Frog Ferry, we're projecting saving 20,000 metric tons of carbon when we're in full operation, not during the pilot for next year, but when we have 5 or 6 vessels operating, which is equivalent to about 4,500 commuters or 2,000 homes. And later, when the vessels can transition to pure electric propulsion rather than partial electric and hybrid electric, the savings will be much greater. But the frog ferries will, help with this problem of road congestion and pollution associated with that, and also with the very underserved and low-income neighborhoods in North Portland on the pilot. And I think that the boats are designed to operate with extremely low wakes, use 100% renewable fuels, and then, like I said, and then stop using electric propulsion and slow speeds in the city core and near the stops. And we know that air quality is really diminished in North Portland, and this will make a difference. And I think it'd be something very worth saving or supporting. And I think it'll also do a lot when it is in full operation to help restore the downtown core livability. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And we did actually have one more person who in the chat indicated that they wanted to provide public comment. And I did just want to give the opportunity because some folks logged on late and may have logged on after sort of the, meeting orientation part, that if you do want to provide public comment, please put that in the chat. We're getting toward the end of that time, but we do want to make sure that everybody kind of knew that that's where they should indicate their interest. So Willie Levinson, if you could unmute yourself, and then if you want to turn your camera on, do that as well.
Awesome. Thanks for giving me an opportunity to testify in support of the grant allocation for Frog Ferry. I'm the director of Human Access Project. Our mission is transforming Portland's relationship with the Willamette River. A lot of people know us from the event, The Big Float. We also spearheaded the opening of Poets Beach, Audrey McCall Beach, and this past year we converted Lake Kevin Duckworth to non-motorized use, effectively creating a new swimming area in Portland. So we've been working really closely with Susan. She's put together a great business plan. This is going to be a form of transportation that is comparable or less expensive than TriMet. It's something that is a right of way. So when you're commuting to work, you know, one of the things you have to consider with transit is it ultimately has to compete with a car. This is something that's going to be able to bring people from North Portland to downtown faster than a car or a bus. And it's a much more pleasant experience. So from our perspective, I mean, this is a way to connect people to the water. It's a quality of life issue. And it's such an ambitious project. It's really unbelievable that Susan and her team have been able to bring it as far as she has. And this grant will just help keep this nudging forward. But, you know, ultimately in terms of low impact for climate, in terms of something that will help provide another route of evacuation in a catastrophe situation, and in the context of you know, something that's going to bring livability to Portland at a really affordable rate, and it's pandemic safe. This is transportation you can use and take a commute outside and not be stuck in a bus. So really appreciate your consideration of the endorsement, and hopefully Susan will be able to continue moving this forward. I know she will, but this will certainly allow her to focus her energy on moving it forward rather than the next source of funding to keep this going.
You're muted, Katie. You may be muted.
So it looks like, thanks, Sam. It looks like that that is the end of the public comment list. And so I actually am just going to go ahead and hand it over to Sam after just sort of reviewing the agenda a little bit to kind of like open the meeting and orient us a little bit. So we just got through public comment. We're going to first go into a review of application development and the grant review process to kind of remind us where we have been, and then move on to an overview of the applications that we received this funding round at around 7:10, and no later than 7:30. We will take a break, and then we'll come back and for a discussion of grant funding recommendations, looking at the portfolio balancing approach and what options the committee would like to explore, and then close with committee member comments and adjourn this first of our kind of two meetings about funding recommendations for this first round. So I'm going to hand it over to Sam.
Thank you, Katie. And I just want to acknowledge, you know, this is both our first full meeting of the new year, a first meeting of this kind. So it's going to take a little bit to figure out how we do this. And even hearing some of the public comment, I think there's just some guidance that we're going to come back and provide afterwards. But I'll just acknowledge for folks that are listening in via YouTube that are with us here in Zoom, please check out our website, and there are the meeting materials, including the memo on the portfolio recommendations, as well as the PowerPoint. So this is just going to be a little bit of a little opening context setting, a little housekeeping, and some agenda setting, although you heard the agenda. I want to acknowledge that a lot has changed, and you know, as we enter this new year, and that this is a really important meeting. This is one out of two meetings where we expect the PCEF committee will work through and make their inaugural funding recommendations. Also, right now, as a program, you heard about some of our staff, but we're just about to hire 11 staff member, and really that's really the full build out of the implementation team, and we're going to be crossing a major milestone, and it is a major milestone. So, you know, there's been countless evenings, nights, weekends from both the committee and staff, with so many folks chiming along the way and providing the thoughts to get us here. So that's not lost on us, but as we jump in here, I will ask today that the committee really focus on the funding recommendations. I know that there's a lot on committee members' minds about what's next, including other work we need to do, and we are tracking this. And so I'll just put that placeholder. today is going to be really we're going to be working through and orienting everyone, including the public, around what we've done to get to here, and orienting folks around a couple of portfolios that we are outlining. And then we expect folks to get to decision next week on March 3rd. So today, really just be present and really absorb this material, ask questions, but we're not expecting a decision today. And then for the committee members, our last scheduled meeting that we have on the calendar with you all is March 10th. And so that's where we pick back the conversation back up around what's next, but that's a lot. And so this little housekeeping I want to do before we jump ahead is just to check in with you all and see, would you all want to take another week and meet at March 17th just to give a little space before we pick back up? And I just while we have your attention here, I just wanted to check in and see if for that sort of follow-up after we make the inaugural funding recommendations, would there be a preference or interest in meeting on March 17th instead of March 10th as we pick up and think about what's next? So what I'm looking for from folks is, does March 17th work? Would folks have a preference for that, or is March 10th better? And if it doesn't work, and if it ends up being a little bit more of a scheduling thing, I can follow up via email as well. How about this? Does March 17th not work for folks? Okay. I think what we're going to take the silence to be is we're going to give you all a couple of weeks so we can come back, celebrate appropriately after breathing on March 17th to talk about what's next. Katie?
Sam, I just wanted to note that we did get a comment in the chat that March 17th is during spring break, which is for folks who have kids in school. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there, but we can follow up on scheduling with committee members.
So we'll round back, but maybe what I'll just keep a lookout. We've sent a lot of emails in the past few weeks, and I know we're cognizant of what that means in terms of our asks on you all, which have been a lot and really appreciated. So just keep a lookout that we're going to send one more email, and it's going to be generally just checking in on scheduling and scheduling our subsequent meetings. But getting to what we're here for today, bringing you all back in. I'm going to start, Katie, can we move to the next slide? What I want to start with is just orienting folks around where we've been. It's taken a lot to get here. And so we put this timeline together, and we just wanted to walk through this timeline because there's a lot captured in here. And I think it's important that we reflect on a lot of the work that the committee has done and some of those outputs that led us to today. And so just as a starting point, once we brought folks on around November of 2019, we took the first several months to really do a lot of onboarding of committee members and do a lot of education to make sure folks on the committee, bringing together subject matter experts, community experts, and others focused on topics around clean energy, energy efficiency, regenerative ag, green infrastructure, workforce, contractor development, affordable housing, and just a lot of level setting to make sure there's a good baseline understanding of these topic areas across the committee. And then we began work on developing guiding principles for the committee. And I'm going to share a little bit of those and ground us in those in a minute. But I wanted to acknowledge that the next step that we worked on, the robust step that we worked on, was really developing guiding principles. And the guiding principles really describe the values by which the PCEF program is administered, and they complement the legislative code. We did that work essentially from February through about April of 2020, and we put those out for public comment and received about 103 public comment, over 200 public comments on the guiding principles, and adopted those in April. Now, all of that went into informing the scoring criteria, our application process, and a lot of the conversations we expect to have with you all later today. So while we were finalizing our guiding principles, there's a great effort with our grant review subcommittee that began with a subcommittee of 4 folks. This was Renfis, Faith, Megan, Robin, and then staff doing a lot of just work to tease out what were best practices of other funders in the area, and ultimately elevating that and bringing that to the full committee. And so there's a lot of work from April 2020 through June 2020 with the full committee as well as the grant subcommittee to develop the grant criteria. We put those out for public comment in June of 2020 for over a 4-week period, and received about 103 public comments, and came back and responded to that and worked with the committee to respond to those public comments, adjust our scoring criteria, simplify our application, and a whole host of other changes in response to that feedback. And then afterwards, we revised, tweaked, came back to the committee, and finally got committee approval for the release of the RFP. And we released the RFP on September 16, 2020, for a roughly 9-week period. We hosted 6 webinars during that 9-week period, 6 grant writing trainings during that 9-week period, and we had over 250 people attend either grant writing training or a webinar, and we answered over 150 questions related to the RFP that were addendums, additional information. So this is all to say that the program throughout every step has solicited and received feedback, and that comes and is informing a lot of what we are going to be talking about today and coming back to. And so I'm not going to dig into this little bit right here, this grant evaluation, this like second to last bucket, but after these next 2 meetings, we hope, next week, March 3rd, you all come to a decision. We'll work on finalizing the packet for City Council approval, and that date is scheduled for April 1st at 2 p.m. Next slide. And then not to throw any I'm not great with my analogies here, but we will take a moment to celebrate, and we will come back, and in the same way that the program and staff has solicited and received feedback from community in every step of the process, we will continue to do so, and all of that feedback will be informing the development of findings or recommendations that we bring back to you all for your review as we start to work on our next solicitation for next year, which will be 60 million. So there's going to be a lot of work, and we've got a lot of great foundations set up in order to tweak what we've developed this year to come back and improve that for next year. Okay. All right, next slide. So I spoke a little bit about this just a bit ago. The guiding principles, these are the values, these describe the values by which the program is administered. These guiding principles complement our legislative code and help ensure that the decisions made by the committee and staff are made in a way that aligns with the vision and values of the committee as well as the community. So I'm going to pause here and just let folks, as we're going to come back to this towards the end, and this is going to be something that we're going to be using as part of our conversation on our scoring panels. So I'm going to just pause here so that folks within the audience as well as committee members can just reorient themselves around the guiding principles. And so I'll give this a minute so that folks can take a moment to read this, ground ourselves in this before we move on to our next slide. Okay. And for folks on the phone or folks that want to come back to this, this is all posted on our website as well. All right, next slide. So next, we're going to spend a little bit to talk about the actual grant review process. And I've got many screens in front of me. So Katie, if I'm missing something or there's a hand that goes up, please ping me. I've got way too many resources in front of me and too many screens. Okay.
The only thing the only thing that has kind of was sent to me in the chat was just a question about accessibility for folks who are vision impaired. And I just am realizing that we kind of took a moment to really think about the guiding principles, but we didn't, in not reading them aloud, may have created a lack of access for folks who are vision impaired. So I just wonder if we maybe want to go back and read those aloud.
Let's go for it.
Oops, went in the wrong direction.
Okay, I will read them. Thank you. So guiding principles are fourfold. The first is that the program is focused on climate action with multiple benefits. That the program invests in people, livelihoods, places, and processes that build climate resilience, community wealth, foster healthy communities, and support regenerative systems, avoid and mitigate displacement, especially resulting from gentrification pressures. I'm going to ask the committee members want to read one of the other ones. Does anyone want to pick up on the next one?
Justice driven, advanced systems change that addresses historic and current discrimination. Center all disadvantaged and marginalized groups, particularly Black and Indigenous people. I'm gonna tag Megan for community powered.
Community powered, trust community knowledge, experience, innovation, and leadership. Honor and build on existing work and partnerships while supporting capacity building for emerging community groups and diverse coalitions. Engage with and invest in community-driven approaches that foster community power to create meaningful change. And I'll follow, and Ranfis, I'm gonna pick on you.
Accountable, implement transparent funding, oversight, and engagement processes that promote continuous learning, programmatic checks and balances, and improvement. Demonstrate achievement of equitable social, economic, and environmental benefit. Remain accountable to target beneficiaries, grantees, and all Portlanders. I'll kick it back to Sam.
Thank you. She's probably done that at the beginning. Thank you all for going along with that. And thank you for the call out. Colin. All right, let's keep this going forward. Okay, so next we're going to talk a little bit about our grant review process. So we spoke a little bit about the timeline and everything that really came to releasing our RFP, the work that came out in terms of really pushing out information and making sure folks understood the RFP as well as possible, and just the outreach to make sure folks knew the opportunity. So this next phase, we're going to talk about just what was the actual review process. So, next slide. So there's really 3 core phases to the review process. There's first an eligibility screening, and this is just to make sure that does a proposal meet the basic requirements? Is a proposal in the city of Portland? Is the proposal coming from a nonprofit organization? So just making sure the minimum criteria that generally speaking are coming from the code are met. And that's what the eligibility screening was. And Katie shortly will speak to the numbers of proposals and where they landed through that. Then we had a technical review. And this is really to ensure that is the project technically feasible? Does the project have any fatal flaws? Can the project as designed actually be implemented? So it was not a, it really was a low bar, but it was intended to be, can this project happen as designed? But it wasn't, and that's what it was. And we wanted to make sure that this is just to make sure that if a project cannot feasibly happen, and not necessarily casting any more judgment than that it wouldn't go there. And staff and contractor, staff primarily conducted technical feasibility. And then the last step before coming here is our scoring panels. And so we had, and let me pull my numbers here. We had 9 scoring panels with 3 members each. And so each scoring panel member reviewed each application and scored it on organizational capacity, the project description and scope, environmental benefit, social benefit, economic benefit, as well as the budget. Now, each scoring panel, which again comprised of 3 members, was comprised of at least 1 staff member, 1 committee member, as well as an additional member, which was generally city staff. So not necessarily PCEF staff, but otherwise subject matter expert that was city staff. Every single scoring panel was at least majority BIPOC or non-white identifying individuals, and there's a subject matter expert on every scoring panel. There were 22 reviewers in total across 133 applications. The scoring panels had 2 phases. There's independent scoring, where each committee member reviewed, or each scoring panel member reviewed each application. And then they came together with the scoring panel members after they reviewed each application, provided the scores to each applicant. We provided an opportunity for every single applicant to respond to their scores. And then the scoring panel members came together to discuss both their individual scores as well as the feedback they received back from applicants based on their initial scores. In total, there was 27 scoring panel meetings, which took roughly 50 hours. And the independent scoring, we said 300 plus, but I remember looking back at this, and it was actually closer to about 1,000 hours that were spent in total in independent scoring panel review across all the individuals that participated in the scoring panel review. So it was a robust effort. It was our first year, and so I want to acknowledge that this is going to be something that we will certainly be coming back to, and we do have an evaluation process where we will capture the feedback of all of our scoring panel members, our committee members, and staff. But I just want to give a moment right now, particularly for committee members who are part of that process, if there are any reflections that were top of mind that folks wanted to share, or any just questions. And I used to one question. So I do want to just acknowledge that I want to share that we will have a space where we come back and dig into the scoring panel process. But I also know that there are things that are on top of mind for folks, and want to make sure we don't miss that opportunity too.
Ramsey?
Yeah, thank you. Just want to, thank all the community groups that applied and their patience in this process, and just want to thank staff for shepherding us throughout this process as well. This is our first year doing this, so there's a lot of there's a learning curve in this, and I appreciate all the work that's been put into this, and I just want to sort of thank many of the experts and folks who've stepped in also to score these applications, because I think there's a lot of work behind the scenes that we don't normally see. So just want to acknowledge all that work. With that said, I hope there's opportunities to also share folks who've been part of the scoring process to the public. I think it's, as a community fund, I hope continue to sort of keep building community. I think it's important for us as a committee to continue to engage with the broader public, and for the broader public to get to know us and continue to demystify, the whole scoring process. So I'm really thankful for the clarity here, because I think for many folks, sometimes it can feel sort of vague how we score, but I think this has been really helpful and clear how we've gone through the scoring process. So just, again, kudos to everyone involved, and thank you for getting us to this stage. And there's much to learn, so looking forward to that refinement process. But yeah, thank you to the whole team.
So Ramses, I'll follow back up, but maybe let me make sure I heard you. What we can do is we'll check in with all the scoring panel members. I mean, this wasn't, and I think we can just give them a heads up, and I think we can come back and share that in a subsequent meeting. Okay, great, and thank you. And it's hard to understate how much effort there was. It's generally speaking, there's at least 2 to 3 hours of review per application, and out of 133 applications. So it gives you just a sense, and there's at least three individuals that put eyes on every single application, usually more. And so it was certainly a tremendous effort, and really can't thank all the committee members, staff, and others that participated in that process, particularly as we work through that process over the holidays. Okay. If there's no reflections, we'll keep this going. Oh.
Megan.
Sorry, I'm trying to follow protocol. Well, Ramses was very eloquent and covered a lot of ground, so thank you, Ramses. But yeah, I do think that for public and community members watching and listening, I think as a committee member who was very involved in the grant application development, I do want to reiterate what Sam said, that it was a very intentional and robust process. And you can see that on the slide. The slide's actually a bit overwhelming when you think about the hours and the structure and the process and what it all went through. So I guess I want to assure everybody that we really did read all your applications really closely. And then we talked about them, and we thought about them, and we tried to apply the scoring guidelines we had come up with in a really thoughtful process developed by our guiding principles. And through it all, I think that hopefully we come up with a really great package of recommendations. And we also probably learned that the process could use refining for future times. And that's, I think, a normal part of any time you're developing something from scratch. So I think we're all humble to the reality that it didn't work perfectly, and there might be things we want to change in future rounds. But I do, as a committee member, feel that it was robust and intentional and transparent too, as much as possible. And I feel good about that. So yes, and I also echo Randy's thank yous all around for everybody who shepherded through and committed volunteer and or staff and or out of time that I know is precious to trying to do our due diligence as community stewards of this amazing fund.
Okay, you're muted.
Thanks, Megan. Are there any other comments from committee members? All right. I think we can keep trucking.
Okay. And I just want to, I'll try to do it better, Maria. Anyways, there's an accessibility comment that I picked up, and thank you. I'll make sure we do better on that as we move forward. Okay. So
okay.
Katie, it's all you.
With that, so I'm just going to go over the next few slides, and then any questions or comments from the committee, and then at the end of that, I think we will take a break. There's kind of like a natural breaking point there, and then Sam will sort of pick up with what is like the discussion about how to make the decision. So we received a bunch of applications. It was we had our internal staff, bets on how many we were going to get, and I think that we were all under. So we got 140 responses to this initial solicitation. 135 of those were eligible, and 133 were deemed both eligible and technically feasible. So those 133 were passed on to the scoring panel, and that's kind of where we're at right now, winnowing down this pretty robust pool for our initial offering. So this graph is the first of many that is pretty dense and has a lot of information and numbers on it. And so I think that our approach is just to kind of go through them kind of piece by piece. So the bars on this grant are represent only eligible small and large grant applications. So we took the planning grants kind of out of the mix for the purposes of sort of trying to characterize the different groups of grant applicants. So you can see the green represents the total amount, and the size is really scaled with the funding request, not the number of applications. And then the little orange chart there, those are the target ranges that the committee and the program put out in the RFP. We said, we think that we are going to fund around $3.4 to $5 million in clean energy, about $1.7 to $2.1 million in workforce development and contractor support, about $840,000 to $1.3 million in regenerative agriculture and green infrastructure. So those are the ranges that we published, and they're based on the targets that are in the code. And we did not, the committee did not publish an intended target range for the sort of other category, the innovation and other category. In the code, it says sort of like over time, it's about 5%. So there is, and then you'll also notice there are 3 applications that kind of fall into this multi-category. That's not to say that the clean energy projects are purely clean energy, just that everything that's in that kind of categorized as clean energy are primarily clean energy. But there were 3 projects that were like just really truly like half one category, half another category. There wasn't a good way to say that, like, this is primarily workforce or this is primarily regenerative ag. And so that's what those 3 applications are. We saw I would say the majority of applications, we saw components of many different funding areas. We saw clean energy projects that had a workforce component and regenerative ag projects that had a clean energy component. And so there's, that is, I think, appeared in most applications. So it was at $27 million that was requested total in 77 of those small and large grant applications. 57% of the applicant were small applications, 43% large, 61%, so a little over half, included physical improvements. So the workforce development and contractor support applications, none of those include a physical improvement. So that's where most of that comes into play. Most of the applications in the clean energy and the regenerative ag green infrastructure applications, most of those had physical improvements as a component of the application, although not all, but most did. The average small grant request was 46,000, or just over 46,000. The average large grant request was just about 625,000, and nearly half of funds requested were requested by grantees that reflect the priority population that the project intends to serve. And so that was one of the scoring criteria for small and large grant applicants, was that you could kind of get points if your staff and your leader, including the leadership of your staff and your board, reflected the population that the project was intended to serve. So that is what that number means. Are there any questions on this slide before I move on? Guys are so quiet tonight. We will keep chugging. So this is this lonely little bar here are the planning grants. So this is we wanted to separate them out just because they are really just kind of they're a different kind of grant. So there were 4.8 million requested for 56 planning grant applications. If you recall, the planning grants had a cap of $100,000. And the average request for planning grants was about 86,000, and the smallest request we got was just under 14,000. About half of the applicants were from small or emerging organizations, so organizations with 6 or fewer full-time year-round employees, or kind of younger than 3 years. And I do see that there are members of the public who are raising their hands. I think we could ask folks to reserve questions for committee members so that we can get through this process and maybe contact staff separately, or at the public comment at the next meeting, bring those comments in. But certainly reach out to staff directly to with any questions you have. So about 64% of applicants received full points for reflecting the communities they intend to serve. So that was the pretty similar, just a little bit, maybe a little bit higher than for the small and large grant applications, which was about half. It was difficult to categorize. It was more difficult to put to sort of categorize planning grants into our funding areas, funding bucket areas, because a lot of planning grants were kind of at the beginning of their process and they weren't totally sure, and they didn't want to eliminate possibilities, and so they just selected multiple categories. So you can see that 22 of those applicants selected multiple categories. 14 were workforce, 9 were innovation and other, 7 were exclusively regenerative ag, green infrastructure, and 4 were exclusively for clean energy. So again, 56 applications requesting $4.8 million total. All right, you guys, we are ahead of schedule. Sam, I do see, I am getting questions in the chat about providing public comment, and I think that it is from folks who maybe signed on to the meeting a little bit late. We do have public comment at the beginning of the meeting, and we also, yeah, so Sam just put in the chat an email, so you could email your public comment there and we can provide it to the committee. There also is another committee meeting next week, sort of same time, same place, if you wanted to speak directly to the committee. Sam, did you want to move on or did you want to take a break now?
This this actually is a nice point for a break. I think as often as we blow through our breaks, I think I'd like to honor that if folks are okay with that. So let's go ahead and take a full 7:04. I think let's take a full 10 minutes and then a minute and come back at 7:15. Does that work for folks? Okay. Let's see if I can get a quick. We put one of the kiddos down, maybe one. Okay. We'll see you all.
members to let us know you're here. Saw your message, Amanda. Thank you. Okay. Sam, are you ready to roll? Oh, you're muted.
All right, thank you. All right, so thank you all for thank you all. All right, so for this next part of the conversation, I guess I'm glad you're all just coming back with us. Maybe that's the thank you. So for this next part of the conversation, we're going to really jump into the portfolios and characterizing the portfolios that we've pulled together for you all. And so obviously there's a lot of work that has gone into it. So let's just jump in. Next slide. So as I noted earlier today, this really is an opportunity for you all to just get out all of your reflections between, so that we as staff can go back and work on and come back to you all next week. So there isn't an expectation of a decision day. So I hope that can take a little bit of the pressure off to really just being present in the conversation. We just want to know, there was over 30 million in proposals for almost 9 million in funding availability. So there are plenty of really great proposals, and so and proposals that won't necessarily be able to get funded. And so applicants that do not get funded, we want to reassure you, will be provided feedback, and we'll have opportunities for capacity building and funding in the very near future. We're not going to try to tee that conversation up now, but we've already started to outline some of the key parameters for the next solicitations, and so we feel pretty excited about what's ahead. As you think about and as you discuss and as we talk about the portfolios, what we'd love to hear from you all is just, are there other characteristics than those that we're about to show in the next few slides that you want to know about, that you have interest about, that would help inform your decision between one portfolio and another, or a different way to pull together a portfolio? So we've started with really two portfolios, Portfolio A and Portfolio B, which and the memo for that is posted on our event site. But we've created two portfolios, and so we'd love to know between today and next meeting, is there things coming up is there other iterations that you'd like to see, or other characteristics to help describe the portfolios? And then we'll bring you back towards the end. We'll bring you back and try to center this all in the guiding principles and frame this for how one portfolio or another align with your guiding principles. And so I hope that, I guess maybe I'll just make sure just to check, does that all sound okay for folks? Are there any questions about the next set of slides here that we'll go down here in a second? Okay. All right. Next slide. So this just at a high level, and we'll get a few more comparisons in a few slides, but this just gives you at a funding level the key differences between Portfolio A and Portfolio B. And we started with creating the portfolios based on ranking the applications based on the scoring panel scores and integrating two key decisions made by the committee leading up to the release of the RFP. One of those decisions was that you wanted to allocate at least 1.5 million to planning grants. And so that's what Portfolio A shows. It shows a portfolio that's crafted as 1.5 million going to planning grants, and roughly we're striking the middle of the ranges for clean energy workforce, regenerative ag, green infrastructure. And so I'm going to talk about what those middle of the ranges were. That was sort of the second key criteria or key decision made by the committee, was that you wanted to publish ranges for each of the funding areas in order to give folks a sense for what they could expect in each of the funding areas. And so for clean energy, that range is 3.4 to 5 million, and that's what the bars on the chart show. The yellow bar is the 3.4, and the red bar is the top end, the 5 million. For workforce and contractor development grants, it's 1.7 to 2.1 million. So again, that's what the yellow bar is, and then the red bar. for regenerative ag green infrastructure is about 840,000 to 1.3 million. And so as Katie had noted earlier, those multi-category grants do fit within those other categories. So that's why you don't see an indication there. And so then as a way to create sort of some examples for you all, the second portfolio, Portfolio B, was looking at the other end. It was looking at what if we were to fund up to 2.5 million in planning grants. And that was, and that's what we were able to do while generally speaking, preserving the funding of the minimum target ranges for all the categories. So that was the exercise we took there. Portfolio A is 1.5 million in planning grants. Portfolio B is roughly 2.5 million in planning grants. And for all the other categories, your clean energy projects, workforce, regenerative ag, and green infrastructure, it's at the minimum range. That was the approach that we took to creating the two portfolios for comparison, in part because the ranges are narrow. And I'll share, for instance, for example, the range for workforce and contractor development is 1.7 to 2.1 million. That was a spread of roughly $400,000. Yet our largest grant was, our largest grant that one could apply for was $1 million. And so things didn't always neatly fall where if you took the next highest ranked project in a category out, you may dip well below the range. And so that's something that I just want to acknowledge that's going to come up as we talk about some of these criteria, that some of these funding areas are no different from Portfolio A or Portfolio B. Okay. So before I jump into Portfolio A and start characterizing it, and the next slide is busy, so I'm going to do my best to go slow through it. I just want to see if there are any questions about this particular slide in front of you all.
Megan?
Yeah, Sam, maybe you clarified this when you said it out loud, but I didn't hear. I just trying to understand, you said that Portfolio B meets at least the minimum of the thresholds, but when I look at the slide, it looks like that is not true of clean energy. So I guess I'm just trying to understand that.
It's slightly shy. So of the multi-categories, this is where it's a little, of the multi-categories, both of, in Portfolio A, there's 2 proposals in the multi-category. In Portfolio B, there's 1 proposal in the multi-category. And in both of those portfolios, the 2 projects that are in the multi-category are, they're probably, I would say, anywhere from a half to 2/3 clean energy. So we would still be shy. I actually want to acknowledge, Megan, what you noted there. We would still be shy of the minimum. And this is just without, that's sort of the way that they fell in terms of just the next set of projects and how you'd move things around. And so it was we didn't want to be, it was in our position to make any of those sorts of adjustments, so that it was just a challenge with the size, the size of the next project down the list.
Yeah, just as a quick follow-up, that it's not really a question, just more of a collective reminder. I think that we as a committee have discussed that the balancing doesn't have to be in 1 year of funding. It could happen over the course of 2 or 3 years. So if we don't quite meet the clean energy one this time, we would have to sort of adjust for that in future funding, right?
That's right. That's programmatically, we are tracking the funding allocation in terms of how are we meeting the code obligation to fund within each category on a 3-year rolling average basis. So to the extent that we skew out of that 1 year, yes, we do need to make up for it in future years. But it's really more about, this is really what we published in the RFP, where these were the target ranges. And so I want to acknowledge, maybe what I will acknowledge, and is that I'll stop there. I think I'll leave room for comments.
Michael?
So just in the number of grants, what's the difference in planning between Portfolio A and Portfolio B in the number of grants, and in clean energy between A and B?
I think this is probably a good point. But I sense it's probably a good point, and not to say that this will leave this information, but actually, Michael, for that point, I want to move to the next slide because we'll get into that detail. Okay, I'm gonna just pause here and let this sink in a little bit, because there's a lot of information on this page, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna walk through in sort of a clockwise fashion to each of the pieces of information on this page. But what folks are seeing in front of them here is portfolio option A, where the sort of the criteria that we used to define this was about 1.5 million in planning grants, and we tried to strike, again, this where we started was striking the midpoint for the funding categories. In this portfolio, there are 36 grants that would be funded. The total lifetime greenhouse gas impact that we evaluated would measure about 13,000 metric tons. And within this, there are 10 projects with physical infrastructure that are east of 82nd. And so as sort of a reminder, well, I'll stop there and I'll come back. If you go, and I want to not actually go clockwise, I'm going to go directly down below that first set of information, where it actually indicates, Michael, the information you're asking for, how many grants and how much funding is going towards each of those categories. So within Portfolio A, we have 9 grants going for clean energy projects. These are, energy efficiency and renewable energy projects. We have 4 grants going towards workforce and contractor development projects. We've got 4 grants going towards regenerative agriculture and green infrastructure projects. We have 2 multi-category grants. For both of them, there was clean energy was a significant component. For one of them, it had sort of as the other part of it, it had a workforce development. And for the other one, for the other part of it, it had a green infrastructure. So a little bit of a mix. And then there were 17 planning grants in this one, which amounted to about, almost just about 1.47 million. Okay, and so I'll move on to what I'm going to do. I'll move on, and we're going to do probably a little bit of just flipping back and forth. So I'm going to just describe some of this other information around this particular portfolio, and it's going to just raise other questions for folks. So I'll just finish off the explanation of this and how it differs from Portfolio B. We listed in the top right corner this little chart, little box, where we said portfolio scoring indicators. Now, this information comes from directly from the application or questions asked within the application. Within Portfolio A, there are, of the 36 total grants that are in that portfolio, 31 of them scored a perfect score. So that was the maximum score on the question that asked whether the applicant reflected the priority population they intended to serve. So does the board, does the staff, does their senior leadership reflect one of our priority populations, whether it's communities of color, whether it's low-income folks, others. And so at least 31 of 36 of those proposals reflect the priority population. And of the projects that are not planning grants, so 17 of those are planning grants. The small and large grants, there's 19 small and large grants. Of those small and large grants that are implementation grants, 14 of those 19 got a perfect score on that particular question. Now, we asked a question about the size of an organization. It was really whether they had 6 or less employees. And so you'll see that about a little bit over a third of the applicants also came from organizations that had 6 or less employees. Just to get a sense for, I know that was a key point we talked a lot about in terms of organizational size, and whether this, so that's just a metric that we were showing here. And then of the small and large grants, so again, there's 19 of the proposals in this portfolio are implementation grants, they're small or large grants. Of those 19, 15 of them have physical improvements. So what that pretty much is all of the clean energy projects, all of the regenerative ag green infrastructure projects, and both of the multi-projects all have physical improvements associated with them. And then the balance of those that don't have physical improvements are your workforce projects. And so you could say of the 15 that have physical improvements, 10 of those, and this goes to the box in the upper right, are projects in East Portland or serving East Portland. Okay, I'm gonna I'm not going to jump to the next slide yet. I said a lot of information, and then we have this chart down below that shows just a little bit of the distribution. This is to the bottom right-hand corner. There's a bar graph that shows the distribution of the number of projects within sort of funding allotment. So we had, for instance, there is four in this portfolio. There's 4 grants that were from $400 to $500,000. But there's also 4 grants that were less than that were implementation projects that were less than 100,000, and there are 4 grants that were 100 to 200,000. So, and then there's 1 grant that was between 800 and 900,000. So that's just a little bit of what that graph shows. It's just a little bit of how many projects were within those funding ranges. So before I move to the next slide, because we're going to show you similar information in terms of characteristics, just gonna be different numbers. So before I move to the next slide, maybe I want to make sure, are there any questions about any of these characteristics that are being displayed here? And we'll certainly be going back and forth and talking about this. And this is where the discussion is. And so we've got more slides, but I do want to make sure if folks have questions about what we mean by physical improvements, what we mean by small organizations, projects serving East Portland.
Looks like Robin has a question or comment.
Yeah, thank you. Tons of data, thank you. A little overwhelming. What I'm struggling with here a little bit is there a way you can provide a sense of what these clean energy grants are all about? You know, at a very high level, I know what they are. And the same thing for workforce or planning. You know, yeah, it's clean energy, but what are these projects about? Are they, you know, digging holes in the ground? Are they putting up satellites? You know, I don't know. Is there some way, and I don't necessarily need to know this today, but because we're probably not making a decision today, but is there a way we can get a better sense of what are we funding other than just clean energy or workforce development or planning?
I could respond to that now, but I would love to be able to come back to you next week to give a little bit, to be, so that I'm not missing sort of or mischaracterizing the proposals. Because yes, I think we've gone through these, that we've got a good sense to be able to relay the gist of these proposals. And so unless Katie, you feel you've got, I know you've spent more time with them, unless you feel like you've got, I'm thinking it may be best for us to come back next week and do that, a little bit of that characterization.
Yeah, and I don't need it here today. I'm just, you know, as I, you know, make my final thoughts, I like to get a better sense of, you know, what are we funding?
Okay, looks like Maria and then Megan.
My question builds on Robin's too. Good one, Robin. Thank you for asking that. I'm trying to figure out how we can make clearer for people who are wondering what the relationship is with the clean energy projects or grants, and then the ones associated with physical improvements, or are they always mostly associated with physical improvements? And then the relationship to GHG impact, especially if we're weighing both portfolios, and you know, the GHG and physical improvements one might stand out more in one portfolio versus the other, and how we can start thinking about that. So no question that needs to be answered now, but would really like to make that a lot clearer for anyone who's following that thread.
I'll come back to that in a second.
Okay, Megan?
Yeah, sorry, I'm going to have a request for more information too, but you said that's what we were supposed to do tonight, so here we go. I have a question about, I have two different questions. Perhaps request for future information next week is totally fine. But on the applicant reflecting priority population, I think if I recall, we were evaluating that in a couple different ways. One was like among leadership, one was staff, so I guess like a little bit of further depth there, and then also depth of like what priority population, because there were some different ones called out in the code. Black, Indigenous, people of color, folks with disabilities, women, low income. And I would like to know that balance more, because yeah, I want to know, particularly I was reflecting on our guiding principles, and we were explicit about mentioning Black and Indigenous led groups. So I'm kind of wondering how that shows up here. yeah, so I have a lot of questions around that angle. And then my other one is a request, I think an easier one to fill. On the number of projects grant by range bar chart, I wonder if, well, this is how I would imagine providing the data, but within there, could you maybe break those bar charts into the type of grant they are so that we get a sense of like, I can kind of tell because there's about $1 million for renewable ag and green infrastructure, but like, what are the size, you know, like, can you add some color coding to those bar charts so we can get a sense of the size of projects so that I know what the big one of 900,000 is, like what category of grant is that? Things like that. Thank you.
Sorry, guys, I grabbed the wrong phone and tried to unmute myself. Michael?
Hey, I guess that for everybody that's joining us from the community today, I'd also like to say that all of us don't know what all the applications were. Just in case you're wondering why we're asking, so what kind of green energy or what kind of clean energy grants are we getting? We all looked at about 15 grants each out of the 138. So for example, I don't know what the urban agriculture and renewable and green infrastructure looks like as an example, because I didn't see any of those grant proposals.
Thank you, Michael. I think that is a really important clarification there. There was one committee member that was on the scoring panel for so one committee member looked at every single application, but there was the rest of them that the rest of you didn't see. Sorry, go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, I'll start with just responding to some of those. And I think that it gives us a good set of homework to come back to. And so that folks know, for instance, you know, when we talk about the physical improvements, generally speaking, we don't expect workforce and contract development proposals to have physical improvements. They could, but we generally did not expect to see that there. So, and in this instance, they don't. As far as clean energy, I think most of us generally think about energy efficiency, renewable energy projects as having physical improvements. And in this instance, in this portfolio that's here, they all do have physical improvements. However, there were proposals that didn't, and part of that, and that was what, you know, you could have a conservation education program where folks are helping do community education around managing individuals' energy use now. So there were proposals, and we enabled it to have proposals that addressed that sector, but didn't actually have a physical improvement that folks were installing. So in this particular instance, and same goes for regenerative ag and green infrastructure, in this instance, all of those proposals do have physical improvements. And so within each category, just to leave, you know, what you see here is these were these are all of these projects were the highest ranking projects based on their scores that fell into these categories. And so the way we crafted these portfolios were simply based on 1.5 million in planning grants, and then the balance of trying to strike the middle of each of these other funding areas, or 2.5 million in planning grants. And once you go to 2.5 million, you generally left up funding at least the minimum for the other categories. So those were the staff decisions to craft these. So it was no other decisions than that. Okay, and then and Megan, we will follow back up on your request in terms of just getting a better characterization of that scoring criteria. But what I will just share is that when we acknowledged here that for these particular proposals where you know 31 out of 36 in this portfolio met this applicant reflects party population, it meant that they scored a maximum of 4 on that criteria. In order to score a maximum of 4, that means that a majority of their board, a majority of their senior leadership, and a majority of their staff needed to set at all levels needed to reflect the population that they had intended to serve, their target population, and that target population had to be a priority population for the program. So, but we'll follow back up on some of that more characterization that you're looking for. Okay, I'm gonna flip to the next. Oh, go ahead, Katie. Yep, please.
Oh, I
Go
just
ahead.
want maybe just add one more thing to speak directly to one of Maria's questions, which is that all of the GHG that was calculated is associated with a project that has a physical improvement. We kind of, wrung our hands a fair amount about how and if we might try to calculate GHG impact associated with education efforts or advocacy efforts or, like non-physical or workforce development and training, and just landed on only trying to calculate GHG impacts for projects that have physical improvements. So all of that is coming in these portfolios from the clean energy and green infrastructure regenerative ag. That was the only other just kind of clarifying point. And then I see that Robin has his hand up.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up question on greenhouse gas impact. Is there any target or objective in the code that PCEF must meet, or is it just this is the number based upon the proposals that we got?
There isn't a target within the code. I mean, you're supposed to be implementing the climate action plan. However, we do, I mean, this is going to be the longer term effort with the reporting subcommittee. That is going to be in terms of first just defining what are going to be the performance metrics that folks will be reporting on, but ultimately then coming back and after getting a couple of years under our belt, really fine tuning and getting a sense for when we're investing in climate and we're investing in equity, what is the right sized approach look like in terms of striking those greenhouse, like what is the right goal in terms of those greenhouse gas savings? So I just want to acknowledge that's work that we're going to be doing, and it's important work that we're going to be doing.
Megan, and then Maria.
Hi, yeah, sorry, I had another idea. I'm just also thinking a lot about the locational aspect here, because that is called out in the code, and I think there are good reasons why there was code language around prioritizing projects benefit east of 82nd. So, and I see the overall number. I guess I'm just hoping for some more disaggregation of that. Like, are those like across the topics? Are those, is it all the clean energy ones? Or I think that could be helpful to understand. And then part of me also is curious about the ones that aren't in East Portland, like where do they land? But I also get that we can't like map things because that would show perhaps projects, but I guess I'm just kind of curious about the geographic distribution of all this. Mainly, I just want to be attentive to like, did we just choose 20 projects in one zip code, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think it's just something to be reflecting on.
Thanks, Megan. Maria?
I'm just excited to continue deliberating in this space about how we interpret the code and the targets that Robin asked about. When we want justice-oriented outcomes, are we going to look at the GHG impact rigorously, and how much confidence do we have in that calculation anyway right now at this point? So I really like folks to shed light on that and maybe unravel a little bit about how people got to that calculation for GHG impact. So we can think about that more.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Maria.
Yeah, I'll start with just, I think, a lot of this, what we started with when we thought about, okay, what can we bring and how can we characterize these proposals? We started with what did everyone consistently provide? And that was oftentimes in response to a direct question we asked within the proposal. And so we asked within the proposal in part because we were tracking it because of the code, we asked, is your project serving east of 82nd? And so, and it wasn't always consistent, and sometimes, and we went through, staff went through and looked through each of the proposals. So we'll go back and look through. I just want to acknowledge, we'll go back and look through and see if we can characterize a little bit more of some projects don't have a specific location, maybe a neighborhood, but we'll see if we can characterize that a little bit more. I just want to acknowledge that it probably also will be an incomplete picture because we only explicitly asked that we only had a very explicit question, is your project east of 82nd? And so we have an answer for that from everyone, whereas we might not have a perfect answer for the others. So we'll do our best to come back and next week say, at least this is what it is, acknowledging that it might not be the complete picture. And thank you for the comment, Maria, or discussion. So I'm gonna ask that we move to the next slide here. And we've got a few slides after that, and then at least you'll have the benefit of having seen Portfolio B. Okay, so big difference with Portfolio B is we're talking about 2.5 million for planning grants. Planning grants topped out at about $100,000, and so what that means is you've got a lot more projects. The biggest difference is you've got a lot more projects and more planning grants. That is the substantive difference. You're going from 17 planning grants in Portfolio A to 29 planning grants in Portfolio B, so 12 more planning grants in this portfolio. You're going from 9 clean energy projects in Portfolio A to 7 clean energy projects in Portfolio B. Now, the workforce projects and the regenerative ag and green infrastructure projects remain the same in both of these portfolios, and you lost one of the multi-category proposals. And so that multi-category, it would have been, at least it would have had a component of it would have been clean energy. And so because you lost 2 clean energy projects, as well as a multi-project, one of the key differences is your total lifetime greenhouse gas impact figures do go down, because it was the physical improvements that in those particular projects that captured more of those. You went from 10 projects that had physical improvements serving east of 82nd to 8. So you lost a couple of physical improvements, but in that you did gain, I acknowledge you did gain 12 planning grant proposals. In terms of some of those indicators to the top right, in terms of the applicants reflecting the priority population, overall, you have now 38 of the 45 proposals, and of the total funding, 86% of the total funding, scoring a perfect score on that question, versus 78% in the prior portfolio. In terms of number of small organizations represented in this portfolio, you have 38%. This is an insignificant difference. I think it's 37% in the prior portfolio. And in terms of projects with physical improvements, you're going from I think 15 out of 19 to 12 out of 16. So I think you go down from 61% of the projects of the smaller large grants have physical improvements down to just a little bit less than half. So those are sort of the key differences. I'm sure there's more questions. And so we have additional slides that really sort of just give you a little bit more flavor in terms of scoring, because we haven't talked about the scoring, but I want to acknowledge that there are other slides there. And we can, maybe I'd love to pause for comments, but in some senses, a little bit of me wants to almost share those slides and come back to this and hold here. But I want to just pause here and see what are initial thoughts that are popping up for folks or questions.
Robin?
I see that the asterisk that says all grants that are not planning grants with regards to location. Is there a way to characterize the planning grants have to happen somewhere. They're being led by an organization somewhere. Is there any data that you can provide that just shows where these planning grants are happening, or maybe somehow characterize a little bit more who's doing these planning grants?
So yeah, there's 29, so it's going to be, there's just a lot, so it's going to be I know we have address, but I don't actually always think address is whether it's a PO box or whether it's a fiscally sponsored organization. Katie, I certainly think that we can look through the planning proposals and get a sense for which one of them are like sort of place-based organizations and are speaking to place-based elements. And so we can come back and speak to that, but I just, I know we'll caveat it. So we can do that. We'll do that and we will come back. And I'm not sure what's going to come out of that is what I'm acknowledging here.
And I think, I actually happen to have a lot of, I remember reviewing a lot of planning grants, and I know that a lot of them, have this intent to do something nearby, right? And I know that's a very vague term, but if there's somehow you can capture that information, we plan on, doing this at a farm, on, XYZ street, or, we plan on developing or planning a solar, community solar at this location. that would give me a better sense of where potentially future activity might be happening.
I think maybe, Robin, if I could ask a question. I think that we as a staff and committee have kind of made this decision to go with this portfolio approach where you as the committee aren't seeing kind of which specific applications are represented here. So we might want to be a little vaguer than, this is here are the cross streets, because then it would be pretty easy to identify. Yeah,
I'm not looking for
the
cross
organization.
streets.
Yeah,
Just maybe
but I will say that I think that we can say right now pretty safely, like we definitely have representation in most parts of Portland in both of these portfolios, in the planning and in the implementation. Definitely more heavily on the east side of the river, and we can kind of like maybe give you, go back and kind of look a little deeper at the applications and try and get a little bit more granularity, particularly in the planning grants arena. But, just to kind of maybe if we can right now just allay Megan's concern, like we definitely have multiple zip codes. We have, kind of projects that are have some good geographic distribution, I think. Ramfis?
Yeah, I appreciate this conversation and all the things that have been raised by our committee members. And I just want to recognize for those who are at home who, basically wrote their applications, this is their baby that we're talking about right now. And this is probably the coldest aspect that we're doing in the process. We're just looking at numbers. This is not the heart or the meat that we've all been looking into the last few weeks, reading people's stories, the heart of why they're applying these applications. So just want to recognize where we're at right now and the deliberations that we're having. And I think I could probably agree with everyone here that we probably agree the thing that will keep us up at night, after we make these decisions is not who did we fund, it's who did we not fund. So I just want to recognize that and make that clear for folks who are watching us deliberate on this aspect, because I think the intentions here is, we are trying to work deliberately with those stated values, knowing that there's still a lot to reconcile those values with what's in the code, and how do we act faithfully on both, and how do we reconcile with those. So I think that's a natural tension that's going to play here. But I just want to recognize that we are in some ways it feels like we're trying to pick the cutest baby. But in reality, all the babies are cute. And so I think there's going to be just a tough decision. The need is great. The funding and the capacity to fund it all is not going to be there. So, I think I just want to acknowledge that both here in the committee, but even for the broader community watching us deliberate here, it's not going to be any easy decision. We could split this. We could have a hybrid approach to this, but it's going to be difficult. And so just want to recognize that, and, just want to encourage us. There are decisions that we had made earlier in the year, and, in terms of priority population, being more explicit with BIPOC, those are things I think we'll have an opportunity to refine and revisit moving forward. But just want us to hold on to the things that we have set in motion as a matter of fairness and practice, and just try to trust, and this is going to be a tough one, to trust staff to guide us here. So I'm looking for you all as staff to help guide the plane, if you will, into the runway, so we can make our timelines and make these funding decisions on time, because I think the need, as I noted, the need is great. And we know it's not going to be perfect, and that's I hope for the community out there when we make these decisions, I hope that this isn't disconcerting, that folks aren't discouraged to apply again, because again, I know there's a lot of great applications. I'm like, man, I hope they're in, but knowing the funding limitations, it's going to be difficult. So I just want to sort of share this reflection, and just recognize, I think, just the tension that we're having right now as a committee, knowing that we're trying to do our best on due diligence. And I think the undertones here is, who are we missing when we make a decision between portfolio A or portfolio B? And that's not my favorite part of this. the necessary part, because there's no way to fairly do this justice. And we're going to learn from this. So just want to recognize that and just offer that reflection. And I really am inspired by this committee and this deliberation. And I look forward to hearing back from community what this process has meant for them, because I know we want to do a better job of stewarding this and intending this, because this is the community's fund. So just wanted to, I'll pause there because it's been just my reflection, but I just want to recognize staff's work and trying to really steward this, and just recognize just the complexity and the difficulty, and we've got a lot to reconcile. So just want to thank everyone so far here. So thank you.
Thank you, Ramses. Faith?
I just want to thank you, Renfeast, for saying that. I've been sitting here in this meeting just really appreciating the deliberation, but also feeling a little bit off, feeling like something just didn't sit quite right. And I think it is that piece of just this process, while it's so important and the questions that have come up have been really enlightening, doesn't actually reflect the depth that we've put in to the consideration of all of these applications. And while it's so important that this process is transparent and that the public is invited to participate in this process, I want that to be true. And what's not coming through is the work that happened in each of the individual committees. And so there's something that's not quite honest or transparent about that because of the depth that went into those conversations and meetings. So really, just thank you. I think you did a great job of framing that, and just really appreciate all the work and sincerity and integrity that everyone on the staff and committee, and frankly, all of the applications gave to this process. So thanks.
Thanks, Faith. I want to see if there no pressure, but wanted to just kind of take a minute and make space if there was any comments from some of our committee members who maybe haven't commented yet, or any questions.
No, I don't have too much more to add. I'm resonating with what folks have shared, and I think it helps me. It helps me understand where other folks are at, being in a similar place. So I think, yeah, I'm supportive of all the time and energy that folks have put into this process, and thinking about how we're making responsible choices as stewards of these funds in all these different ways, and appreciative of your efforts.
Yeah, I'll just say the same, just I appreciate everyone's hard work. We've all put our, a lot into this, and, I think this is a milestone that we've hit, and, I'm looking forward to seeing how how the rest of this process goes. I think we've done a very good job up to this point. We put our best foot forward, in my opinion. And like I said, we'll see how this finished steward going through this with committee and staff. And I think this will be successful moving forward. So good work, everyone.
Thanks, Jeffrey. All right, Sam, do you feel ready to move on?
Yeah, let's go to the next slide. So these next set of slides, what we wanted to do, and we wanted to just characterize like a little bit of a sense for what you all just said. These were really great proposals. And so what this chart is showing here, it's on, I'm gonna get, on your y-axis, the vertical axis is the score, and on your x-axis, the horizontal axis is the number of projects. And so each dot represents a proposal. And so you can see for the projects that were predominantly clean energy projects, the yellow line shows the projects that would fall under portfolio B, and the additional 2 red dots, which follow that along this chart, show the projects that would fall in portfolio A. It's the yellow and the red. And so what you see there is that there isn't really, it's pretty linear. All these projects are great. It's just one after another, and the score is just slightly, we just went right down the score. And so you do see, there's a drop once you get towards the end, but otherwise it's fairly linear. And so this will be something that we come back to next year as we set up our solicitations for 30 and 60. We're still brainstorming, but as we come back with a larger solicitation, these will be conversations we come back to you all as we talk about what we didn't do this year and as an intentional decision by you all not to have thresholds. And this will be something we come back and reflect on of what thresholds mean. So I wanted to share this. So this just gets a little bit of a characterization of sort of the scores for each of the proposals within this particular portfolio. And so there's gonna be all the subsequent charts are for the other funding categories. So I just want to stop right here and make sure are there questions about this? And I should acknowledge in this maybe let me stop. Are there questions about this chart and what's being shown in this chart? Okay. All right, let's go to the next slide. And so you see for portfolio B and portfolio A for the workforce development and contractor support proposals, it's the same set of projects that are in both those. In both portfolio A and portfolio B, the number of projects in this funding area do not change. So this chart does just give you, though, that said, a flavor or a sense for all of the portfolios that sort of fit under this funding, all the proposals that fit under this funding area and how they scored. Okay, next slide. This is a chart that's showing how the proposals scored for proposals that were within the regenerative ag and green infrastructure funding area. And again, for this funding category, there is no difference between portfolio A and portfolio B. And just as a reminder, it's because for instance, in this category, I don't have the range is I think 840,000 to 1.3 million. And so it was as if, that last red dot on this chart, if you took it out, you would, and I think in this category, I forget where we struck. I think we were just a little bit under over $1 million. I've got to see, where is it? We are just at about $1 million. And so if you took out that last proposal, you would have dipped well below 840,000. And so, and if you added the next proposal, you would have gone above 1.3 million. So there just wasn't as much wiggle room with this category. And that'll be a good point for reflection as we come back and think about that next year. Okay, next slide. And then this gives you a sense for the big chunk of proposals. So these are the planning application or the planning proposal scores. And you see the sort of in the red, and that's the portfolio A where we have a smaller number of planning proposals. We have 17 in there. It shows you how they scored. And so they're all scoring fairly high. And then portfolio B, it's just we were adding the section in red in addition to the section in yellow. It captures portfolio B. And so you see it's again similarly here. This wouldn't be an easy exercise. Having sort of the cutoff is always painful, and so the funding is sort of driving that. But because there's no natural sort of there's no natural break where you're like, okay, the proposals sort of drop at this point. And so that's sort of what at least you can see and be illustrated here. Okay, I think we have one more slide, and so we're gonna be able to screen back. So I think there may be some back and forth, but we'll get to this slide. So we just want to bring you back to the guiding principles. And so, one of the other ways in which we talked about, thinking through the portfolios was your guiding principles, and the committee's asked to evaluate portfolios for alignment with guiding principles. So this purely was here, and it means that the guiding principles, there's an interpretation to them, and it is your guiding principles. And so, we wrote a couple examples here that, one, you could say portfolio A supports accountability with higher calculable greenhouse gas emissions through clean energy projects, and it supports climate action multiple benefits with the balance. There's that three other additional implementation grants in that portfolio, and they address GHG benefits, and this gives you, may speak a little bit, Robin, to what you're saying. Each of them address GHG benefits, but also reduce energy bills for priority populations. And so we'll come back with a little bit more than that, but there's a few ways in which you can think about one portfolio versus another. Portfolio B, it supports justice driven because there's 6 additional planning grants in that portfolio that reflect the community they serve, that scored a perfect score. And then it also supports community power by adding 7 planning grants that increase capacity for emerging or small groups, which there's some of those within that portfolio, within those additional planning grants. Okay.
Michael?
So you don't have to answer this, but you know what I'm going to ask for is the narrative. We as committee members haven't seen all the grants. You as staff members have seen them all. And I sort of just want a general feeling of portfolio A versus portfolio B, right? Because I like the idea of justice driven and community powered, but we're also very much tasked with climate action and actually reducing greenhouse gases and having a direct impact on the community. So I can look at the numbers and just, flip a coin, but I don't know what the feeling is. I don't know what the narrative is. I don't know what feels good about it or not at this point. And that's sort of what at the end of this, I feel like that's what I am personally missing is a feeling, right? I think it can be good either way. And I'm not leaning one way or the other at this point. But it's because I have no feeling about it either.
We're gonna try. I mean, I think you all have given us direction around a handful of pieces. I really appreciate that, Michael. I think that's right. And I know that we've got direction to both give a better sense for some of the proposals, some of the sense of what are within these actual implementation grants, these categories. So we'll come back and think a little bit about how to do that. And I mean, as I acknowledge, the difference between, and Katie, maybe let's not move off of this slide. The difference between portfolio A and portfolio B, right? It's 1.5 million versus 2.5 million. So it's $1 million additional going to planning grants. And that $1 million in an implementation grants, it's 3 implementation projects that we lost to get to 12 more planning grants. And so, we'll think about how to just characterize sort of the delta, like not the delta difference. I'm just thinking of how to characterize like the 12 planning grants you gain on one side versus the three implementation proposals you either gain or lose depending on the portfolio. So we'll think about that. I think we can come back with something. It's always going to be a little bit hard, but I think we can come back with something more than certainly what you have here. I don't know whether we will meet I don't know whether we can fully do justice to what you're asking for, and I appreciate what you're saying, Michael. So I think we're going to keep. Well, I'm listening. We're listening.
I'm going to say that I do appreciate that you don't want to have too much undue influence, but I also need an opinion piece here. Right, because I'm lacking a certain amount of information.
I'm just going to chime in to say that Maria and Robin have their hands up and certainly not to offer an opinion.
Yeah, it's been a week. It's been a couple years. I don't know. If you're in frontline communities, I know watching this is a whole different experience. But I am hanging on to every word that my my colleagues here are sharing, because I have only your testimony right now to relate with, and I keep refreshing the screen thinking that chat comments are going to show up or that something's going to pop on YouTube. But I hope people watching this could reach out to the staff and, you know, share your reactions, because I think we will depend a lot on some of that feedback at this point to ground some of the things we're thinking, but also the scoring is done and there's a lot of, you know, thought that went into that. So I'm just trying to figure out, is there anything else that the committee members want to contribute? Because you're like the only folks I'm feeling in the room right now. So I hope you can chime in. This virtual stuff is harder than ever. And I didn't think that feeling that we keep talking about would not be present. And I think this virtual space and the things that have happened in the past few weeks have been that for us.
Robin? Thanks, Maria.
Yeah, I just want to first chime off a comment from Maria and Michael. You know, my earlier comment or request about, you know, getting some more information about the grants, you know, resonates with, you know, what was just said, is that I don't feel these grants. It's just numbers, and I feel the ones that I read, but I don't feel, you know, the grants that are in portfolio A and B. And you know, this PCEF is a very community driven thing. And it's very difficult in this whole space, virtual, to feel, you know, the community in these deliberations. So to the degree that you can provide some of that information when we meet or reconvene in next week, that would be extremely beneficial. The other comment or question I have, and I apologize if I'm going to upset the cart, but you know, you have portfolio A and portfolio B, and I understand how you you know, kind of structured them. Are there other ways of slicing the cake? You know, is there a portfolio C? Just kind of curious what your thinking is, or thoughts as you know, as you were preparing the various scenarios. You know, are there other feasible scenarios, or are we really have this choice of, you know, A or B, or maybe A and a half? I don't know. You know.
Sam, did you want to speak to Robin's question, or do you want to put a pin in that?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Faith.
I was kind of waiting for Sam's answer to Robin's question. Although, yeah, I mean, Robin, Sam's going to say, right? I'm going to project onto Sam. Is going to say, yeah, of course there's other options, right? We can slice the cake in another way. And maybe that makes sense. I wanted to respond to Michael and to Maria particularly. I don't think that the additional information we asked for is going to give us the feeling that you're looking for. The work that we did with the scoring that we have, that we're trusting in one another and in those committees to have come up with a proper scoring based on the criteria that we came up with, is where we've decided on which projects are going to rise to the top. And the difference between A and B, which of course are not the only two options, are, I mean, if we went with B, we would not be funding 3 great projects, I'm sure, right? That are implementation projects, and we'd be funding more planning grants. And I will just, for myself, there's a reason why funding more planning grants makes sense. I'm not saying that that's a decision or a way that I'm leaning, but there is some real logic to me in funding more planning grants, in addition to the fact that we can talk about how it supports justice-driven and community-powered. I'm sure that we could also make those statements about Portfolio A, and we could come up on that same side there. But we are going to be going out in future rounds with much, much larger funding opportunities. And I would really hope that we are creating opportunity for those folks to be ready to for more folks to be ready to take on the opportunity that's going to exist in a short while. And I'm concerned with the level of dollars that are going to be in those next funding portfolios, that we may not actually get the qualified, we may not use all of those funds because if we don't seed those planning grants now. So that's one thing that I'm thinking about in evaluating kind of the two different approaches as to whether or not more project level grants or more planning grants right now. That's a consideration I've got. And I totally get how dissatisfying this is right now, or unsatisfying.
Faith Francis?
Yeah, I think ditto with what Faith just said. I think, you know, I'm definitely supportive of, you know, I think making these, all the applications accessible to both Robin and Michael and for the full committee, folks who have time. I think we'll definitely miss the breadth of conversation and deliberation that we had within each of these panels. I think that's something that we just need to acknowledge is if we make these all accessible, we're just going to miss those same conversations, deliberations. And I agree with Faith that I don't think it makes the decision easier. It definitely makes it more difficult. I know I would definitely have more challenges trying to decide between portfolio A and portfolio B, but that's probably just me personally. And I think, you know, I think I agree as well. Like I think in the context between, you know, planning grants and adding, you know, implementation grants, I think I kind of agree with Faith's logic there. You know, I think it could go another way as well. We do have another funding cycle coming up. You know, I don't want to lean too much on my own bias and trying to fund all the groups or as many groups as we can, because I think that exists in me personally. One thing I do, you know, want to try to avoid too, you know, for folks who are tracking this is, you know, I think we've made it pretty clear where the differences between portfolio A and portfolio B. So I do want to avoid the scenario of creating camps between pro planning grant camps, you know, chiming in. I think it's important, and pro you know, implementation grants. So I think it's, you know, I think with more information from the community, I think it will make things more difficult. And I think that's fine. That's the complexity of the work and the heart that people put into this. So I just want to, you know, honor, I think, what both Rob and Michael, and I think maybe others have chimed in about just needing to know and having more of the heart. And I don't necessarily feel like even just a summary from staff is going to do that justice either. So I think that's something that we just need to reconcile. But I'm supportive, you know, if, you know, making this more, you know, more accessible for other grant, you know, committee members to read full applications. It's going to require more time. And I think, but I just want to recognize that the diligence, the conversations that will be missed, that we had more time in the previous couple of months. So I think, yeah, anyway, I'm just going to land there. Just want to acknowledge, I think I kind of agree with Faith in terms suggestion there around planning grants, but recognize this challenging conversation we're having.
Maria, and then Michael and Faith. Is your hand up again or still? Okay, I'll put it down. So Maria.
I just want to be clear, I don't have the capacity or interest in asking for all of the applications to review all over again to feel confident in, you know, how we decide. But I think this information was presented to us in this way with these clear examples and portfolios. So whether or not like the intention was to create camps, I think we're trying to make some decisions or you're trying to get reactions based on how the data is presented tonight. And that's what we're working with without having to look at, you know, all the applications again. So we're doing our best to interpret what's presented in front of us. And, you know, these guiding principles are powerful and help us kind of see a snapshot, but, you know, we really like to have more conversation, obviously, so that we can make those confident choices and really lean into what the heart of this policy and what the community organizing was all about. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Thanks, Maria. Sam, I see your finger, and then maybe Michael right after that.
I just want to jump in really quickly because I'm realizing I should have responded probably to Robin a little while ago, and this is good conversation. So, well, I want to say the 2 portfolios are starting place. That was where it was without us making any additional judgments. It was here's sort of the basics, and here's ranking the portfolios in there. So we can come back with one other iteration. And we're happy to talk through that here. And then I will just say that there are phenomenal proposals here, and so it's going to be great to turn around to the 60 million because there are phenomenal proposals, and it's having seen the list, it's phenomenal proposals throughout. So,
Michael.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm right there with Maria. I don't have the capacity to read any more proposals at this moment. I guess what I was saying was that I just wanted to hear, like Faith was saying, that what's the feeling of the implementation versus the I just wanted to get some feelings about it, I guess, more than, I trust that we all did an amazing job at ranking and scoring all of these applications. I know that our group did, that I was part of. And I'm sure everybody else did too. So I'm not doubting like what's at the top score or what's not. I'm just sort of trying to get a feeling for Faith sways me towards the idea of planning proposals right now. Now I'm all like happy about that idea. So I'm easily swayed. I just didn't have any. We'd come through all of this, and it just felt like numbers at the end. And so I was just sort of trying to get a bit more of a feeling as opposed to just looking at a bunch of graphs and. Graphs, I'm a person that graphs don't speak to, unfortunately. So that's all.
Thank you, Michael. Megan?
Yeah, I'm appreciating this, and I think it's true that some of you pointed out that this feels kind of like a technical, bureaucratic, data-driven process, in which it's maybe not the most satisfying way to think about, like 140 organizations and stories and cool projects, but it just is what it is. I think we are moving towards a decision. Kind of one reflection I have that doesn't solve anything is that that in the end, I'm disappointed we can only fund 30 something because there are 140 or whatever applications, and most of them were really, really good. And yeah, so I think at the end of the day, I recognize like while it's very exciting to fund 40 or whatever number we come to, it's also really disappointing to not fund the other 100. So I hope applicants out there who aren't funded this round do turn around and strengthen their application as best as possible and apply again. But I honestly think we're going to hit. I think we're going to need more money, like to fund all these great projects and to achieve the goals. Like it's just not enough money to do these giant goals. And all the great organizations in Portland. So I'm kind of just sitting with like that feeling of disappointment. I knew coming into this that I would actually feel more disappointed than excited because it means we're not funding anyway. But so that's just a comment I felt like I had to make. But on the whole, portfolio A and B, I also can see merit in either approach in the way it's presented, not knowing enough more about them. I will say, kind of just to present a counterpoint, that what stuck out to me from A is the really immediate impacts. Like I'm thinking a lot about Texas this week and like people on the ground suffering from really high energy costs and from the immediate impacts of climate change. And like, I want to be doing something about that now because people are getting harmed by it now. So I guess that's why the comments like that address GHG benefits and reduce energy bills for priority populations now, like that, like just hit me today. And so did the greenhouse gas reductions. So I also see the merit of both sides, and I'm not going to, I would support any decision at this point, but I see that as something worth reflecting on.
I know this is great. This is the conversation we want to have. So I thank you all. This is exactly the kind of conversation that needs to be happening. So I just really appreciate this. And it's this is, I mean, it's as painful as it is. There's great ideas out there, and we'll be we're going to give you all a break. We've been driving hard for a while, and so there will be a break. And there's a good chunk of work, and we've already begun the work of laying out sort of the sideboards for the next RFPs. So we've begun doing that work, digesting sort of what worked in this process, what didn't work, what are things that we expect our conversations will bring to you all to say, these are things we're going to anticipate changing. So there is, I mean, the other side is pretty close, and we will be coming back with pretty significant funds in pretty short order. And so it's, yeah, I know that folks having shovel-ready projects now means something different too. Or it just altogether having ideas and plans ready to go, and it means something different to have to wait. So I can appreciate both those, and I just want to share that both for you all as well as the public, that that we're excited about what we're seeing, and we're committed to moving and turning around and working with y'all to make this process better and move more money out. With that, I will say that you know, you all do have access within the application portal to review all of the proposals. So all of you all have access to all of the proposals. You can't see the scores, but you can just kind of just peek around and click around. Don't spend time. I agree. It's if I can knowing 133 proposals and what it takes. But if you want, just click around and get a little bit of I would recommend just get a feel for some of the other proposals that weren't in your bucket that you didn't get to review, just so that you have a sense for some of those ideas out there. And it'll give you really, it's more a primer for what's to come next year. But also that some of those may be in these proposals. So
Amanda, just raised your hand. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. You know, through this whole presentation, I really, you know, everything that was said really resonated with what I was feeling. And I just, you know, truly didn't know how to like approach this conversation. Like I'm very new to the committee still, and you know, just very thankful for the many voices and people who contributed to this whole process. And I can't help but think like how many people, like I keep clicking on like the number of participants who are on here, and thinking about the number of people who are part of this conversation right now, and how, you know, they aren't able to ask questions during this process. And I'm like, I can't imagine being on the other end of someone who submitted a grant proposal and seeing like being through this conversation where we are deliberating like the decision that is going to decide if they can have funding for a certain project that they just spent so much time to think about. But I'm wondering, like, I know that you guys open the doors to like get questions to, you know, staff. So I'm wondering, as a committee, are we able to like see what questions have been brought up through this conversation from the viewers? Like, I don't know if contact information is easily accessible on the website, but I personally would love to see like what questions were brought up through this conversation that we had this evening, because, you know, some of our like the guiding principles is like community powered, and the community's voice isn't part of this conversation right now. And that's where I'm kind of like, gosh, I wish I could hear some of these questions that viewers are having in this moment as we kind of deliberate this whole process. Yeah, but overall, I'm just, you know, really thankful for for this process and all the work that has been put into this whole journey to get to this point that we're at right now.
Thank you, Amanda. I really appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
I will. We will make sure we post our email address. It's Clean Energy Fund at portlandoregon.gov. But we will post that, and we do accept comments both before and after committee meetings. So for folks that are on the line, please do email Clean Energy Fund at portlandoregon.gov. We'll also post that into the chat. And we can summarize comments that are coming through there related to just this process. And certainly, folks, there will be public comment at the opening of the next committee meeting. And I know, Amanda, I really appreciate, you jumped headfirst into this and jumped right into scoring, so I appreciate that. And I will just, there was, it's always interesting designing these processes and trying to figure out how we move through these and do things in a way that is both transparent, honors the work that folks have contributed. And I want to also just acknowledge that there was, both the comments that went and the process that went into the guiding principles and directly connecting with and doing our one-on-ones with a whole host of groups that represented Black, Native American, people of color communities, low-income communities, others, that resulted in certainly the guiding, that supported or gave feedback and brought that into the guiding principles, and that same effort that went into the grant scoring criteria and the development of the scoring criteria. And then I say this because this is a moment it's a moment that it feels devoid of it, but I do want to acknowledge the work that led up to this, and then subsequently during the RFP window, the numerous reach outs, one-on-ones, and webinars and just feedback sessions that staff were heavily engaged in, going back and forth and really making sure folks understood understood as much of this and answered questions as diligently as we could and as faithfully as we could. So I know we're getting to this point and that feeling is real, and I can't, but I also want to acknowledge that work and kind of bring that up in this moment now, because it's work that I'm proud that the committee we got to engage in that, and I'm proud of the work that we got to do in making sure folks felt heard throughout the process of getting to this point. But we're here now, and this is very real too.
I just want to acknowledge what Amanda said. I think that was spot on in terms of challenging us around just community voice in this space, and I just want to uplift that, because I think your answer addresses some of that, Sam, but I think maybe what I heard, at least from Amanda's point, is continually challenging us and ensuring community's voice in this process. So I just wanted to honor what I heard and continue to uplift that, because I think that's even a challenge for myself, and I think that's a valuable piece that I think Amanda just contributed.
Any other comments or thoughts? We're at about 8:33, and so I feel like if there feels like more conversation that would be useful before staff come back to you with the information, with the sort of request that you made of us, then we absolutely have the kind of time and space to do that. And if not, I guess I would ask Sam, if there's anything else you wanted to add, or if we close early.
I think we've got a good sense of direction from folks in terms of how we can bring a little bit more life and flavor to this. Thank you, Renfis, and thank you, Amanda. And I hope in my comments, I hope my timing wasn't off in that. I agree with everything, Amanda, you said as well. So we've shared our email address, and that's one way, and certainly the public comment, we'll make sure we elevate that in just the communication that goes out leading up to next week's meeting. But please do, we welcome folks chiming in that, to reach out to us, and we can at least summarize what's coming through there for folks in terms of this particular meeting. next week. And then folks want to come in next week and provide public comment, we welcome that too. So I just, so I think that there's good stuff that we've heard and good work for us to do in terms of characterizing and describing these two portfolios in front of you all. What I do want to check in is whether there is another iteration, and it's more that we started with these two. Is there an iteration of, if there is a sort of a portfolio C or D that folks would like to see? Kind of rhymed there. If there is one, and we can go back to the slides that describe the two portfolios. If that's, so that we can come out sort of with some of that direction. I think we've got good direction on how to describe these two. I just want to make sure, is there also a third, third or fourth that you all would like to see? And this was our starting point, because anything beyond this would be was really an expression of our sort of opinion. And so this felt like a good starting point, but if there's some other iteration, I'd love to give just a little bit of space for that. And if not, then we'll give you back some time.
Robin?
Yeah, I don't necessarily want to advocate for another portfolio, but I would be kind of curious, you know, what are the other options? I mean, you know, going back to how do we slice the cake? Are there other options available? I don't know how to slice the cake. I just know that there's A and B right now. But again, I'm generally happy with A and B. I can see, you know, A and B working, you know, based upon my understanding of the universe.
I think maybe if I could offer up, there are fairly limited options unless you go outside of the target funding ranges, right? Like, so if you want to disregard those ranges, and that is a choice that the committee can make, to Megan's point, you know, and Sam said also, like, we're sort of tracking that on on a 3-year average kind of basis, which we don't have right now because this is the very first year, but 3 years from now, that's what we'll be doing. Those are target ranges that we did publish in the RFP, so there might be some community expectation around them, but it is certainly within your kind of purview to say, we're going to go outside of it for, you know, because you want to. If you don't leave those target ranges, there's not a ton of flexibility. There's kind of between the 1.5 million in planning grants and the 2.5 million, there's like maybe a little bit that you could do in there. Sorry, Michael, I just saw your hand.
And if I remember correctly, I'm going to go back a few months, 4 months, 5 months, sometime during the COVID era, that we actually as a committee decided on the funding ranges, right? We decided that we wanted to be within a certain percentage of the target ranges. And that's why it was on the RFPs, correct? So if we can stay within those are what we had already agreed upon during debate of months ago.
And this isn't, I know that we're asking you all essentially to think on the fly, so that may be hard. And so what I would, in terms of just some of those things, so what I would, I think Katie mentioned, there really isn't, it's true, there isn't too much range, but there is probably if you wanted to strike 2 million in planning grants, it gets a little bit like, what are you gaining? And so we'll have to think about how we actually describe it, but there is, that really is probably some of the play there. And then I would look back to the memo. It would be, I would look back and look at the memo. Did we give some we spoke to a little bit of what wasn't there, and if there is a particular, okay, is there a portfolio that addresses this? We can think through that. And so or maybe in terms of a little bit of an out, not an out, but is it takes us a little bit of time to craft this, pull it together, make it and send it out. So that's going to take us time, and we're meeting next Wednesday. But if folks want to give us feedback by, I would say like Friday at noon, in terms of other things that, if you all take a day to think about the portfolios, and if you all want to do that, that'll give us at least a little bit, that'll give us enough time to pull them together and come back in the next meeting. Just to give you the benefit of having a little bit of that space and not forcing that thought right here while we're all staring at you.
I think, sorry, this is Rain Feast on my end. I think digesting this a little bit and pushing this to next week makes sense. I did appreciate hearing both Megan and Faith's take on this, because I think it, you know, if I could nominate them to do a debate on either side, I would appreciate that. But I think, yeah, I think we're probably at a stage of just meditate and digest on this. So I do appreciate both Megan and Faith's contribution on this, because I think it definitely made us think about this in a different way. And you know, if other folks have other takes, you know, or an option C, I personally am interested to hear it. You know, again, I think, you know, I have my current leaning, but I definitely want to wait until I hear from everyone in this committee before making a decision.
Faith?
I'm just curious if you, in the ranges that we're talking about, if you evaluated the full portfolio, so not A and B, with a score threshold. So given the number of applications, given the ranges, and if we had a cutoff on scores, if you did that and what that would be if you did. Like we had to score 78 in order to get funded. I think it would be somewhere around there, just if I remember correctly, but I don't know exactly, something like that. It may not make a difference.
Can you say that? Sorry, can you say that one more time for me? What you would be, so ignoring the project type, is that what you're saying? And just funding sort of like top to bottom, all the project types?
Well, that's not where I was coming from, although I think that would still be possible given what we've seen the allocation be, that the funding types didn't seem to make a difference in the scoring. I mean, the scores seem to be quite level, right?
Mm-hmm.
A little bit maybe, right? So is there a threshold that makes sense? Even keeping the buckets where they are, is there a threshold that was like, well, we're just not going to fund anything lower than a 78? I'm just curious whether that made any difference in the portfolios. My sense is it probably didn't, but.
Okay, you should answer this one. Or I'm happy to answer it too. Sorry to put you on the spot.
So if we were, well, I mean, I guess I just would note that we didn't establish thresholds. That was a conversation that we sort of, a path that we started going down as a committee and with staff, and sort of then made the decision that for the first round, we didn't want to establish a threshold because we didn't really know what kind of applications we were get and how they were going to work with this scoring criteria kind of sausage maker that we were putting together for the first time. So we didn't want to have some, you know, like unintended consequences there. I think that we do have a lot, we have a lot more information about kind of how our scoring criteria worked and what the outputs are, and what kinds of applications we got, that we might be able to do that next time, establish kind of like, you know, you have to score above this to be able to be considered for funding. Yeah, so I don't know if that answers your question. I think that maybe Sam, if you have a different answer.
I just really, maybe I may misunderstand. I think maybe I'll go at a different angle. It's I think across the, I guess I know that as I look through, I wouldn't use the scores across the funding buckets, because the fact that some of depending on the type of proposal it had different scoring criteria, and generally there's a consistency across them. And I think there's analysis we can do for the scoring criteria, for instance, that were consistent across all the proposals. So there's some scoring criteria that went across all of them. But then if you were a physical infrastructure project that was over $200 or over $500,000, you had a lot of other criteria you were scored on. And so I think the sort of way that we've broken it out it does well, but I think that there's a little bit of that we'll definitely be coming back to for the next round. to kind of look through and do that analysis. But I hesitate to use a threshold for reasons Katie's already just stated, but also the fact that if you were to try to use one across the categories, like we noticed that, you know, workforce and contractor development projects yielded higher scores in general than applicants in the other categories. I mean, and so I think we've got a lot of thoughts around why that could be, but there's going to be work to tease that out. And so it's a longer deep dive. I don't think that impacts necessarily the way we've structured it and taking an approach and evaluating it this way. But if we were to try to use a score across categories, then that could be one of those areas where I would say we should think about that a little bit harder.
Yeah, I think I understand the question now. Yeah, sorry.
No, I just wanted to say that's helpful. Thanks for that reflection. And I'm not suggesting that we do that. I just wondered if you'd evaluated it.
We did. Yeah, it's going to be good. It's going to be something that we come back. It is going to be a place where we come back to as we come back and sort of just reflect on the analysis of what got funded, what didn't get funded, and how that played out in the scores. It'll be definitely a place we come back to.
Michael?
And to add to that also, I would like to say that, you know, this is my first granting experience, but I have to say that this doesn't have anything to do with tomorrow or next week or anything, but that, you know, we have that I wanted to fund all the ones that we got, but some that didn't score as well were ones that I really wanted to fund, right? But like, you know, like in my top 3 out of the 15 was one that did not score nearly as well, but that I thought was really good. So, you know, and so numbers aren't always, I guess, you know, that's why I always have a problem with a bottom threshold, is that if you don't make those hard numbers, then there's no place for that narrative. It's that same like kind of colonial approach of like, you know, you got 72% on your test, you don't get to go on to 4th grade, right? Like it's and so it feels, you know, like that's why I always have a hard time with minimums to be, you know, to be qualified, I guess.
Thanks for that, Michael. Ramses?
Yeah, I don't think expect an answer now, but maybe kind of sort of in a similar vein that kind of what Michael just raised, like it's always helpful to know if there were in either of these scenarios, if there was just like any because of the way that because of the scoring, if there were any other like unintentional like disparities, that we anticipated. Might not be the case in either of these scenarios, but I think I know when we were talking about scoring and even the flaws of scoring, that there might just be unintentional disparities, whether it's just our biases or unconscious biases and any of all the other factors that the system that we try to build that we just didn't take into account for. So I think that would be helpful to know. I don't expect something now, but next week. But I think yeah. I mean, probably the similar vein of what I've explained earlier is like always that. What are we missing that we didn't anticipate? But
Ramses, I mean, I think this is something that, given that this was our first year, I certainly paid very close attention to, or were there any trends that was going to be enough that we would have to put a pause and come back to you all. So that was something with a keen eye to just. Is there anything where we, you want to have that sort of ground truth, that gut check, or did we miss a mark did we miss the mark in a way? And I feel that I feel that there are tweaks. They're most definitely there are things we're going to want to just fix and adjust. But I feel having kept an eye through the sort of process to this, that was one thing I just kind of kept in my back of my mind, that is there something that we just like, oh, we did not see that right, and that really played out in a consistent disparity for particular priority populations, and that didn't show up. I feel pretty good that did not show up, but there's going to be things we're going to want to adjust. So I feel confident I can answer that here, but I think we'll still bring more flavor next week to this. All right, so
it feels a little funny to ask for closing or for committee comments now, because I feel like that's what we've been asking for, but now we're asking for kind of committee closing comments. And if there are any, additional pieces that you want to send us off with. So maybe can we try just going around the room, and I'll call on you. If you don't have anything to say, you can just say, no thanks, have a good night. And then I'll let Sam kind of have the final word. And I'm gonna start with Robin.
Why do you always start with me?
You're right
Oh,
next
you're
to
right
me
next to you.
in my view. Yeah.
So yeah, I just want to say I really appreciated this conversation. It was very enlightening. I certainly had my own perspectives going into this meeting, and just really appreciate the comments and other perspectives. So thank you everybody for sharing. I do have a question. You don't have to answer this right now, right now, but we're in the midst of deliberations, and we're not going to reconvene for another week. Do you have any guidance? Should we be talking to each other, or are we members of a jury, or I just want to be make sure that we're not crossing any lines.
I would say, we'll send this direction out around the public comment and around providing comments. That really should come through us, just to make sure that it's consistent and you all are hearing consistently from everyone. So as far as folks sharing comments, we would ask that you refrain from connecting with folks directly about these proposals, and if they reach out to you, direct them to send their comments to the Clean Energy Fund, so that way we can make sure that you all have the benefit of seeing all of them together. I mean, that is important that everyone has the consistent set of information, everyone's seeing that. So if folks do reach out to you, you can let them know they can testify next week at the committee meeting. We're gonna have to think about that, but in terms of just managing that, but I would direct them there, or sending an email to cleanenergyfund@portlandoregon.gov, and we'll summarize that and bring that back to you all. Thank you, Robin.
Thanks, Robin. Shanice?
Yeah, I just want to just affirm folks' comments / for all the people watching and present tonight. I think it's clear that there's a wealth of ideas and expertise and projects that will be really beneficial to Portland and all the communities that we touch. And so I think especially our Black and Native folks and communities of color in this work, just wanting to provide and echo Amanda's comments as well, for what it means to provide channels to hear and understand what's coming up for you, and just expressing commitment that that's important to me as we continue the process. And I'm just reflecting a lot. This is just like how a manifestation of whiteness, right? In organizations and processes, and I think a part of moving forward in our next steps, we can really push back on this either or thinking that I think on accident is kind of happening in the ways in which we're looking at our projects. And I'm excited to dive deeper in a more thematic way, aligning with our vision and values in these ideas, right, that folks brought forward. And so committee members, I appreciate y'all, and I think I was grappling with the right ways to have trust in the process, especially with the charge that we really have in the system that we're working within. And until next time, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Shanice. Jeffrey?
Yeah, I'll keep it very brief. I appreciate all of my committee members and your guys' your perspectives. It's a lot to process, and I really appreciate the staff for preparing all this information for us. You guys did a very good job of shepherding us through this, and a lot to think about. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Megan?
Oh, I already spoke a lot, so I'll pass and hear from others.
Faith?
It's just a real honor to be in community with you all. And by you all, I mean also all of our community members who took interest in PCEF and applied. So just thank you.
Michael?
I first want to say thank you, Shanice, for what you said about kind of falling into the either or trap. I'd also like to say thank you to all the community members that dropped so much knowledge on us. Back when we were meeting in person, and every meeting we had people from the community coming and educating us on their communities and on what they do. This has been a long and educational process for me, and I'm kind of excited about giving out a little bit of money and finishing this first round. It's been a long road, and I think we've really been diligent about involving community, and I hope we don't start slacking on involving community. I hope we continue to have that community first focus as we continue to do this. And that's all. And thank all y'all. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Maria?
I'm grateful for everyone who's put energy into this work so far. I'm really appreciating the slowness of it at times, because it really brings me back to this poster on my wall from the Black Space Manifesto that says move at the speed of trust. So there's a lot of urgency behind this, but also a lot of needs for it to take on the pace that it does at times. And I appreciate everyone who's trusting this process and the slowness of it, but also the urgency that's behind all of it. So thanks for all of you.
Thank you, Maria. And Rand, please. Oh, no, you're not last. You're just the last person I can see. Rand, please, and then Amanda.
Yeah, appreciate all the comments from the committee. Even if it's your first time, I think you brought a lot of valuable insight here. And so keep encouraging folks to keep chiming in. And I think it doesn't get easier, but appreciate, I think all the conversations we've had here. And then I think for the broader community, this is your fund. Keep being engaged, keep challenging us. We're baking this cake together. And I've definitely crossed paths with many folks in the broader community who definitely can be on this grant making committee. So I just wanted to be that clear, there's no super special expert to be here. And so just want to, just be thankful for the cake that we're making together.
Thanks, Rantis. And Amanda.
Yeah, thank you. Just again, want to echo everyone's appreciation to the staff, the community, and the committee. This process has been, such like Michael was saying, such an educational experience, and just want to acknowledge the wealth of lived experiences that we are, privileged to touch and see through this entire journey. And as we all try to undo this, kind of decolonize this system at the same time, while being forced to be data driven and everything. So I'm just really grateful for every single one of you, the community, the committee members, and just everything that's being shared in this space.
Thanks, Amanda. All right, Sam, I'm going to hand it to you to close us out.
I just love you all. I really appreciate this. Thank you. I look forward to next week. And I need one of y'all to sign up for opening inspiration. So I'm gonna say that I'm gonna come to someone this time. I'm coming to someone next time. But just remember that we will follow up with some stuff, and I will ask you all for an opening inspiration. So thank you, Angela, for doing that for us today. And I'm looking to y'all. All right. Have a good night. And thank you to everyone chiming in.
Bye. And bye to all of those who logged on and listened. And I am going to end.
Recording stopped.